Since time immemorial, humanity has whispered of a truth far stranger than the fleeting span of a single life, that the soul does not perish with the body, but returns, again and again, to walk the earth in new forms. Yet, what if this cycle is not one of boundless freedom, but of unseen chains? What if the blood that binds us in life also shackles us beyond death? The records of ancient mystics, the coded scrolls of esoteric traditions, and the revelations of the sleeping prophet himself, Edgar Cayce, all speak of a haunting possibility that some souls are not merely reincarnating, but are trapped, doomed to relive their karma within the same lineage, generation after generation. One must consider the weight of such a claim. Reincarnation, as understood by the sages of Tibet, the philosophers of Greece, and the seers of the Akashic records, is not a random scattering of souls across time. It is a precise, almost mathematical unfolding of destiny, where unresolved debts of the spirit demand repayment in flesh. And what debt could be heavier than that of blood? The ties of family are not severed by death, Cayce warned. They are threads in a tapestry far older than our mortal eyes can see, threads that may, under certain conditions, become snares. The mother who returns as her own granddaughter, the father whose sins resurface in the life of his son's son, the lover whose unfinished vow pulls them back, not to a stranger, but to the same face, the same name, the same cursed embrace. History itself bears witness to such patterns. The royal dynasties of Egypt, where incest was not merely custom but cosmic law, believed the divine bloodline must never be diluted, lest the soul's power weaken. The Celtic Druids spoke of ancestral spirits lingering in the land, waiting to be reborn into the same clan. And in the hidden archives of Cayce's readings, we find chilling accounts of souls who, through oaths broken or loves betrayed, bound themselves to a lineage as surely as a prisoner to his cell. Is it coincidence that your family carries the same burdens, the same triumphs, the same unexplained echoes of lives long past? Or is it the slow turning of a wheel you cannot see? Pause now, and let the question settle like dust on an old tomb. Look upon the faces of those who share your blood, not as mere relatives, but as fellow travelers on a journey you may have taken before. Have you ever met the eyes of a stranger and felt the ghost of recognition? Have the sins of your ancestors ever risen in your own life, as if the past itself were a living thing? If so, you may already sense the truth Cayce uncovered, that some souls do not choose their families, they are chosen by them, and the choosing is not always kind. In the shadowed corridors of metaphysical inquiry, there exists a figure whose name still whispers through the annals of spiritual exploration, Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. His contributions to the understanding of reincarnation and the soul's journey are unparalleled. A tapestry woven with threads of ancient wisdom and clairvoyant revelation, Cayce's readings, over 14,000 in number, unveiled a cosmos where the soul is not a passive traveler, but an active participant in its own evolution, bound by the laws of karma and the unseen ties of blood. His work suggests that some souls, burdened by unresolved debts or lessons, may find themselves tethered to the same familial lineage, cycle after cycle, unable to break free until the karmic scales are balanced. The first of the 7 signs Cayce identified is perhaps the most haunting, a recurring sense of déjà vu that transcends mere coincidence. It is not the fleeting recognition of a place or a face, but a profound visceral knowing that one has lived this life before, within these very walls, among these very people. The soul remembers the contours of a mother's grief, the weight of a father's silence, the unspoken burdens passed down like heirlooms. It is as though the script of one's existence has been written in advance, the lines delivered with eerie familiarity. Cayce's readings describe individuals who, upon meeting certain family members for the first time, feel an inexplicable bond, or conversely an irrational aversion, as if the soul carries the residue of past conflicts or affections. Consider, for a moment, the quiet echoes in your own life. Have there been instances where the past seemed to bleed into the present, where the emotions of those who came before you felt like your own? Cayce's insights challenge us to look beyond the surface, to question whether our family's struggles, its triumphs, its tragedies, are merely our own, or if they are the remnants of a soul's unfinished journey. The first sign does not demand proof, it asks only for reflection. For if the soul is indeed bound by blood, then the path to liberation begins not with escape, but with recognition. The question lingers, what will you do when the past knocks on the door of your present? And so we arrive at the second sign, a pattern so deeply woven into the fabric of bloodlines that it defies mere coincidence. Edgar Cayce spoke of it not as fate, but as the echo of unresolved karma, a spectral script replayed across generations. Observe, if you will, the uncanny repetition of behaviors that surface within families like the tides, relentless and bound to the pull of an unseen moon. A grandfather's temper flares in the grandson's fists. A mother's silent grief resurfaces in her daughter's hollow laughter. These are not mere inherited traits, but the lingering footsteps of a soul that has walked this path before and may walk it again unless the cycle is broken. Cayce's readings reveal that such patterns are not random. They are the visible threads of a soul's unfinished work, stitched into the lives of those who follow. Consider the family where every eldest son abandons his roots, only to return in later years, broken and seeking redemption. Or the lineage where women, generation after generation, marry men who mirror the same emotional absence of a long-dead patriarch. The names change. The faces blur with time, yet the script remains. Is it genetics, environment, or is it something far older, a soul's debt, paid in the currency of repetition? The most haunting examples emerge when these patterns defy logic. A child born with phobias that mirror an ancestor's traumatic death. A man who, without explanation, replicates the exact career failures of a great uncle he never knew. Cayce warned that these are not curses but invitations, opportunities for the soul to confront what it once fled. Yet, how many recognize the invitation? How many mistake the echo for their own voice? Pause now and trace the contours of your own lineage. Where do the behaviors of your forebears live within you? Are you the actor in this ancient play, or have you begun to rewrite the script? The answer may determine whether your soul remains bound, or finally walks free. The third sign, the wounds that never heal. And so we arrive at the most insidious of bonds, the unseen scars etched into the soul, passed down like a silent inheritance from one generation to the next. Edgar Cayce spoke of these as unresolved emotional wounds, the kind that do not bleed but fester, shaping the very essence of familial interactions in ways both subtle and devastating. They are not merely memories, they are living entities embedded in the collective psyche of a bloodline, waiting to be reawakened in the laughter of a child, the rage of a parent, or the unspoken grief that lingers in the air like a ghost at the dinner table. Consider the mother who flinches at raised voices, though she cannot recall why, or the father whose love is always conditional, as if withholding affection is the only language he knows. These are not isolated quirks, they are echoes. The child who grows into an adult terrified of abandonment may carry the weight of a great-grandmother's betrayal, her sorrow woven into their DNA like a curse. The sibling rivalry that turns vicious, the spouse who cannot trust, the grandchild who feels an inexplicable guilt, all are threads in the same tapestry, a legacy of pain that refuses to be buried. Cayce quote Sesh readings reveal that these wounds are not random, they are karmic contracts, agreements made in the spirit realm before birth, where souls choose to return to the same familial soil, to either heal what was broken or repeat the cycle in blind obedience to the past. The mother who could never love freely may have been the daughter who was never loved at all. The son who rages without cause may be reliving the fury of an ancestor whose voice was silenced centuries ago. The patterns are never accidental. They are the universe's way of forcing the soul to confront what it has avoided for lifetimes. Yet here lies the paradox. The wound that binds you is also the key to your liberation. For if these emotional legacies are recognized, if one dares to trace the lineage of their own sorrow, they may break the chain. The question lingers then, like a whisper in the dark. What pain do you carry that is not yours to bear? And more haunting still, what pain have you unknowingly passed on? Pause now, close your eyes, let the faces of your family drift before you, not as they are, but as they were, before the walls went up, before the silence took hold. Somewhere in that lineage, a soul is waiting for you to finally set it free. The fourth sign. When blood carries the weight of centuries, they say the past is a foreign country. But what if it is not merely a place one visits, but a burden one inherits? Edgar Cayce's readings reveal a haunting truth that trauma, when left unresolved, does not die with the body. Instead, it seeps into the very marrow of a bloodline, resurfacing generation after generation like a specter refusing to be laid to rest. The fourth sign of a soul bound to its family is the repetition of traumatic experiences, echoes of pain that transcend time replaying in the lives of descendants as if scripted by an unseen hand. Consider the case of the Whitaker family, documented in Cayce's archives, where 3 consecutive generations of women died in childbirth under eerily similar circumstances. The first, a mid-19th century settler in Virginia, perished during a home birth complicated by a storm that prevented the midwife's arrival. Her daughter, decades later, bled out in a hospital, modern medicine powerless against an unseen force. The granddaughter in 1942 suffered a placental abruption so violent that nurses whispered of a curse. Cayce's reading on the youngest woman revealed a soul contract. The original matriarch had, in a past life, abandoned a child during a famine, and the karmic debt demanded repayment in blood. The trauma was not coincidence, it was correction. Or, take the lesser-known account of the Holloway men whose lives were claimed by water, drownings, shipwrecks, even a mysterious bathtub accident in 1967. Cayce traced this back to a 17th century ancestor, a slave trader who threw captives overboard to lighten his ship during a storm. The sea, it seemed, had remembered. Each death was a reckoning, a soul forced to relive the terror it had once inflicted. The pattern only broke when a descendant in 1979 dedicated his life to maritime rescue, a conscious act of atonement that Cayce's readings confirmed had settled the ledger. What makes these stories more than mere tragedy is their spiritual arithmetic. Cayce taught that trauma, when unaddressed, becomes a gravitational force, pulling souls back into the same familial orbit. The body changes, but the lesson remains, and the universe, in its patient wisdom, will recreate the conditions necessary for resolution. A soldier's descendants may inherit his war, a betrayed lover's grandchildren may replay her heartbreak. The form shifts, but the essence lingers, a spiritual residue clinging to the DNA. One must ask then, what patterns haunt your lineage? That recurring illness, that inexplicable fear of fire or heights or abandonment, could it be the whisper of an ancestor's unresolved terror? Cayce's readings suggest that the first step toward liberation is recognition. To break the cycle, one must first see it. The next time history repeats itself in your life, pause. Ask not why this is happening to me, but what is this trying to teach me? And more importantly, who else has stood where I stand? The answers may unlock doors you never knew were closed. The fifth sign, the unlearned lesson. When the soul's curriculum becomes a prison, there exists, within the Akashic records and the readings of Edgar Cayce, a haunting truth, one that whispers of souls ensnared not by fate, but by their own refusal to learn. Imagine, if you will, a classroom without walls, where the teachers are the trials of life itself, and the curriculum is written in the language of suffering, joy, and repetition. The fifth sign of a trapped soul is the relentless return to the same familial stage, not by chance, but by design, a design that becomes a cage when the lesson remains unmastered. Cayce's readings suggest that souls do not choose families at random. They are drawn to the very dynamics that will force them to confront what they have long avoided. A mother who repeatedly births a child only to lose them too soon may be reliving the lesson of surrender. A son who, lifetime after lifetime, finds himself the scapegoat of a bitter lineage may be here to learn the alchemy of self-worth. Yet when the test is failed, when the heart hardens instead of opens, when the wound is nursed rather than healed, the soul is pulled back, as if by an invisible tether, to try once more. Consider the case of a soul, who in the 19th century was born into a family of rigid dogma, their spirit stifled by the weight of unquestioned tradition. They rebelled, only to die in disgrace, their lessons half learned. In the next life they return, not to a different family, but to the same bloodline, now wearing the face of a grandchild, only to find the same suffocating expectations waiting. The names change, the years pass, but the script remains. Cayce's readings reveal that these are not punishments, but opportunities, yet opportunities squandered become shackles. The soul, in its desperation to evolve, clings to the familiar, mistaking repetition for safety, when in truth, it is the very thing that binds them. What lesson, then, sits unlearned in your life? That question lingers like the scent of old parchment in a forgotten library. Perhaps it is the art of forgiveness, offered to you again and again through the same betrayals, the same conflicts, until you finally extend it, not because it is deserved, but because you are ready. Perhaps it is the courage to break a cycle, to step out of a role you were never meant to play, but one you've worn like a second skin across lifetimes. The signs are there, etched into the patterns of your struggles, the same conflicts with authority, the same fear of abandonment, the same inexplicable pull towards certain dynamics, as if your soul recognizes the stage and size. Again, the danger lies not in the lesson itself, but in the illusion that time is infinite. Cayce warned that a soul can grow weary, its edges worn smooth by the same trials, until it no longer seeks growth, but only the numb comfort of the known. To break free is to ask, with brutal honesty, what am I still refusing to see? And then, to look. The family you were born into may not be an accident. It may be the last classroom before graduation, or the first cell of a prison you've built yourself. The choice, as it always has been, is yours. The seventh sign, the chains of expectation. When society's script becomes the soul's prison, they say the past is a foreign country, yet its customs still govern the living. Consider for a moment the silent weight of expectation, how the roles we inherit, the titles we bear, and the duties we fulfill are not always our own choosing. Edgar Cayce's readings reveal a haunting truth. When a soul is bound to the same bloodline across lifetimes, it is often not by chance, but by the invisible shackles of societal demand. The sixth sign does not whisper, it declares that the most insidious form of entrapment is not the unresolved lesson, but the unquestioned life, lived in service to a script written long before the soul ever took breath. The history bears witness to this phenomenon. In feudal Japan, the samurai class was not merely a profession, but a spiritual destiny, where sons were born to wield the swords of their fathers, and daughters to uphold the honor of their houses, no matter the cost to their own desires. Cayce's readings suggest that many of these souls, even in modern incarnations, still carry the residual burden of Bushido, the unspoken code that demands loyalty above self. They may no longer wear armor, yet they find themselves in careers they did not choose, in conflicts they did not start, bound by a sense of duty that feels older than their years. Similarly, the Victorian era's rigid gender roles did not vanish with the century. They linger in the souls of those who lifetime after lifetime return to families where women are caretakers by default, and men are measured by their provision alone. The roles shift in name: housewife to corporate executive, soldier to police officer, but the essence remains a soul playing a part. It did not audition for Dot. What makes this entrapment so perilous is its invisibility. Unlike the dramatic karmic debts or traumatic echoes of past lives, societal expectation masquerades as virtue. It is the voice that says, "This is simply how things are done." It is the unspoken rule that a firstborn son must carry the family legacy, that a youngest daughter must be the peacemaker, that certain professions are noble and others are not. Cayce warned that when a soul repeatedly submits to these external dictates without question, it risks forgetting its own voice entirely. The spirit becomes a vessel for tradition, not transformation. And yet, here lies the paradox. These roles were once necessary. They structured societies, ensured survival, gave meaning to chaos. But what happens when the structure outlives its purpose? The soul, Cayce insisted, is not meant to be a prisoner of history. It is meant to transcend it. The The question then becomes one of awakening. How many of your choices are truly yours? When you stand before the mirror of your life, do you see a person or a performance? The signs are subtle. The lawyer who dreads the courtroom but stays for the family name. The mother who resents her sacrifice yet cannot imagine another path. The artist who works in finance because that's what we do. These are not failures of will but echoes of a deeper binding. If this resonates, pause. Trace the lineage of your decisions. Ask yourself, where does my duty end and my soul begin? For it is only in this inquiry that the chains of expectation begin to loosen, and the spirit remembers it was never meant to be trapped at all. And so we arrive at the seventh and final sign, the most haunting of all, a dissonance so profound it whispers of a soul out of time, a spirit wearing a life that does not fit. Edgar Cayce's readings spoke of those who walk among their kin, yet feel as though they are ghosts in their own lineage, bound not by love alone, but by an invisible tether of karmic obligation. This is the burden of the misaligned soul, the one who carries the weight of a past that was never truly theirs, yet cannot escape its gravitational pull. Picture, if you will, the quiet torment of sitting at a family table, where every laugh, every shared memory, every unspoken rule feels like a script written for someone else. The roles are assigned: caregiver, rebel, peacemaker, black sheep, but none of them sit comfortably upon your shoulders. There is a hollow echo in the chest, a persistent sense that the life you are living is but a shadow play, a performance demanded by bloodlines that have long forgotten why the play began. Cayce described it as a soul wearing borrowed clothes, garments stitched from the expectations of ancestors, the unfulfilled dreams of parents, the silent contracts of karma left unsigned by choice. You move through the motions, yet there is always the nagging sensation that you are reading from the wrong page of a story you did not write. Historical accounts from Cayce's readings reveal that such souls often report recurring dreams of strangers who feel like home, or an inexplicable pull toward cultures, errors, or philosophies that their family dismisses as fantasy. Some speak of a deep, wordless grief when conforming to familial norms, as though each act of compliance is a betrayal of an unseen self. Others describe the uncanny experience of looking into the mirror and not recognizing the reflection, not because the face is unfamiliar, but because the eyes hold a sorrow that belongs to another time. This is the mark of a spirit caught in the web of reincarnation's most cruel paradox, to be physically present, yet spiritually exiled within one's own bloodline. What does it mean when the very air of your childhood home feels thick with the weight of lives you did not live? When the praise of your family lands like a foreign tongue upon your ears, or their criticism cuts not because it is unjust, but because it was never meant for you. Cayce warned that this is the soul's way of signaling its entrapment, not by force, but by the slow erosion of its own truth. The longer the dissonance is ignored, the more the spirit risks being drawn back into the same cycle, doomed to repeat the performance in another lifetime, another body, another variation of the same unfulfilling script. And so we must ask, how much of your life is yours? When you strip away the titles, daughter, son, heir, disappointment, what remains? Is there a voice beneath the noise of obligation, a self that exists beyond the reflection your family has polished for you? The seventh sign does not demand answers. It only asks that you listen, for it is in the silence between expectation and truth that the soul begins to remember why it chose to return, and whether it will ever be free. The seven threads of the unseen web. And so, the tapestry is woven. 7 signs, each a filament of an ancient pattern, binding the soul to the wheel of lineage and consequence. Edgar Cayce's readings did not merely describe these markers, they revealed them as echoes of unfinished symphonies, where karma and bloodline intertwine like vines around an old oak, growing thicker with each lifetime. To see them collectively is to stand before a mirror that reflects not just a face, but the weight of generations, each sign a whisper from the past, a debt unpaid, a lesson unlearned. The first thread pulls at the heart, the inexplicable loyalty to those who have harmed us, as though the soul remembers a vow written in ink older than memory. Then comes the repetition, names, faces, even fates that replay like a broken record, each life a variation on a theme of unresolved conflict. The third sign lingers in the bones, the inherited ailments and afflictions that no doctor can trace to genetics alone, for they are the body's way of speaking the language of past lives. Fourth, there are the dreams, not fleeting phantoms, but vivid recurring sagas, where the same strangers feel like kin, their voices familiar as lullabies from a cradle, long forgotten. The fifth is the burden of the black sheep, the one who carries the sins of the family like a cloak, their rebellion a silent scream against a role they've played before. Sixth, the synchronicities too precise to dismiss, numbers, dates and coincidences that stitch one lifetime to the next with eerie precision. And finally, the seventh, the hollow ache of standing in a room full of loved ones, yet feeling like a ghost in one's own story, as though the script was written for someone else entirely. Together, these signs do not merely suggest entrapment, they reveal it as a spiritual architecture, a labyrinth, where the walls are made of love and obligation, guilt and duty. The family becomes both prison and sanctuary, the karma a ledger that balances not in gold, but in tears and triumphs. Yet here lies the paradox. The very bonds that bind also hold the key to liberation. For if the soul is drawn repeatedly to the same bloodline, it is not merely by chance, but by design, a divine insistence that the lesson must be learned, the wound must be healed, the cycle must be broken. Consider then the implications of your own reflection in this mirror. Do the faces in your family album feel like characters in a play you've performed before? Does the weight of their expectations press upon you like a mantle you've worn in other eras? If so, know this: the universe does not trap without reason, nor does it bind without offering a way out. The path to freedom begins with recognition, acknowledging the threads, then choosing at last to weave a new pattern. It is in the courageous act of facing these signs that the soul finds its scissors, cutting not the ties of love, but the cords of repetition. And what remains is not a severing, but a transformation, a family no longer a chain, but a stepping stone toward the light. And so we arrive at the threshold of a question that has echoed through the lifetimes of souls, one that lingers in the quiet spaces between reincarnation and destiny. Edgar Cayce's revelations do not merely describe the signs of a soul bound to its bloodline, they unveil a deeper truth about the nature of spiritual evolution itself. For if these patterns exist, if the threads of karma weave so tightly that they pull a soul back into the same familial tapestry again and again, then what does that say about the very essence of freedom? Is liberation not the ultimate purpose of the soul's journey? Or is it merely an illusion, obscured by the weight of unresolved legacies? The signs, as we have explored them, are not sentences but invitations. They do not condemn, they reveal. And in that revelation lies the power to choose differently. Cayce's readings suggest that the soul is never truly trapped unless it refuses to see the doors that karma itself has placed before it. The cycles repeat not out of cruelty, but because the lessons remain unlearned, the wounds unhealed, the love unexpressed. Yet within that repetition is the seed of transformation. For every return to the same bloodline is also an opportunity to rewrite the story. The question then is not whether one is bound, but whether one is willing to look deeply enough to find the key dot. Consider karma for a moment, the legacy you carry. Not the name, not the lineage etched in records, but the energetic imprint, the silent vows, the inherited sorrows, the unspoken loyalties that may still tether you to paths long walked. What if the way forward is not to escape the family, but to transmute its karma? What if the soul's liberation begins not in fleeing, but in fulfilling, by meeting the past with such clarity and compassion that its grip dissolves? The practices are as old as spirituality itself. Meditation to quiet the echoes of ancestral voices, forgiveness to sever the chains of resentment, and conscious living to ensure that the cycles you perpetuate are ones of healing, not repetition. Yet even as we speak of breaking free, we must ask, free for what? A soul unshackled from its bloodline is not a soul without purpose, but one ready to create anew. The The legacies we leave are not merely in the lives we touch, but in the vibrations we set into motion, ripples that may one day become the tides of another soul's awakening. So let this be the reflection that lingers long after the words fade. If your soul could step beyond the patterns it has known, what story would it choose to tell next? And when future generations speak of the ancestors who paved their way, will they whisper of a cycle broken, or a light that finally at last shone through?